Hi, I'm Christine. I love poetry and I want to share how surprisingly relevant poetry can be, especially, if you always thought it was just a bunch of awful jargon, like I used to think it was. For example, this poem is called Seawall and it's all about loneliness. And that's something we can all relate to. It was written in the 1930s, I believe, by Julia de Burgos, a Puerto Rican poet. And, it's a translation from Spanish, so it might sound a little murky. I mean, that's hard to escape when it's a translation just because, the translator is going to lose the rhyme and a lot of rhythm and those perfect words that the poet chose. But what you can always get at is the tone of the poem. And the tone is just the vocabulary being used that create a mood. And for example, this poem is, it has a depressive tone, and you can hear that with words like pain and shadows and storm. So listen to the tone, and then we'll get to the poet's stance, which is just the stance that they take. They're like their opinion on the subject. All right, so here's Seawall. I'm going to read it. I'm going to make a seawall with my small happiness. I don't want the sea to know that pains go through my breast. I don't want the sea to touch the shore of my earth. I have run out of dreams, crazy from shadows in the sand. I don't want the sea to look at blue morning in my path. My eyelids were auroras when the storm crossed. I don't want the sea to cry a new rainstorm at my door. All the eyes of the wind already cry me as dead. I'm going to make a seawall with my small happiness, light happiness of knowing myself, mine the hand that closes. I don't want the sea to arrive at the thirst of my poem, blind in the middle of light, broken in the middle of an absence. That's the sound of my cat scratching his post. Okay, so we already know the tone. It's about loneliness, depression. A seawall is a concrete wall that separates the sea from its waves, damaging the shore and whatever's on the shore. So I already get this like storm image. And she says, I'm going to make a seawall with a small bit of happiness that I do have. And that's the stance. The stance is, this world is full of stressors. That's what I interpret this sea to be in this poem. And you can use any interpretation you think she's saying. But I just think of it as something that's killed her dreams, appeared like shadows in the sand, like maybe running after something, it wasn't really there. It's pounding at her door. Yeah, it's just it's bad. And so her stance is, I'm making a seawall. And I might be alone behind this wall. It might be just me and my poetry. But it's what I have. It's who I am. And it's not even necessarily saying you have to know who you are. In fact, she says, my small happiness, even if it's not much, it's still my hand that closes. That's her defiant way of saying, okay, I exist, even the wind won't recognize me as being alive. I'm still here. I'm still going to bring what I have to the table. In her case, it's her poetry. And she says, well, come at me. I think that's very inspiring because, when we're lonely, you do feel like you're alone behind some kind of storm and there's no one there with you. Her last line is broken in the middle of an absence. Broken inside an absence is like a double. She's got nothing left. And yet she still says, I've got myself. And I think that's a great way to look at it when you're feeling depressed. Even if no one's there with you, even though usually there's someone there who cares. You exist. You still have yourself no matter what. Because if you're not there, there's no one that can replace you. There's only one you. And so Burgos recognizes that, and I think that's really beautiful. That's an example of how poetry can really speak to you. I mean, you might have heard me read this, and maybe you heard the tone, but you're like, I don't know what she's actually saying. It can take a couple reads, and some of it you just don't always take literally because they're more creating an image or a feeling, and then you're like, you can mull over it, and it all adds up, but you read it a few times over usually, and that's okay. It's okay to just take away the tone, and it's okay to not really understand it all that well. The more you read poetry, the more it's like you speaking its language. But this was also a not straightforward poem, so I'm going to show you some more straightforward ones coming up. In the meantime, I hope you liked it. If you felt like it said something to you or you have a different interpretation. And of course, if you can read Spanish, go read the original because it's going to be much richer and it rhymes. But other than that, let me know what you think. It's subjective, it's an art form, so go for it. All right, thanks guys. Bye.